a twist.
What's up, humans? Welcome to Katie Rose, Straight Up with a Twist. Before we get started on our topic of the day, I just kind of wanted to talk about personal ailments. As we know, I have my weird things, like I struggle with the B word, B-L-O-O-D. I have sensitivity to touch, soft touches, and weird things like that. Well, I went and got a massage the other day, and I am part of the subscribing member, and I have quit before, and then it's like I always forget after a while, and I'm like, oh, maybe it was just a fluke, and so I'll go back, and I'm sure you know what company I'm talking about, but so, I went back, and I was having issues in my legs for a while, and I, for 2 years, had some strains and couldn't even do my splits like I always had been able to, and then finally, and honestly, I think it's because of me choosing to stretch every day and to do yoga, and because every time I went to a chiropractor, I think they made it worse, so then I stopped going, and then, and you know your body better than anyone else. They're only making, like, educated guesses. I was like, well, massage always does help. Like, I'm always trying to get my husband, and even if it's just temporary relief, like, which is what massage is, basically, it does help, and it does, work, and then it helps you, move into those stretches better. Well, anyways, I went the other day, and maybe I was just in a bad mood. I don't even know. I actually was in a good mood. I ran into a friend, and we were talking, and everything was great. Anyways, and they're nice enough, like the massage therapist. It's not a personal thing, although I guess you could say it's personal because they're the ones massaging you. But I don't know how these people are being trained. Like, a lot of times I feel like a non-masseuse, like, my brother can massage really great. Not that he does that for me, but, sometimes he'll massage my mom's feet, or like I'll have a friend at work, like rub my shoulders real quick. And why does that feel better? Am I alone in this? I'm not even sure. But I feel like a Swedish massage should just be called like the lotion putter on her massage, or like I will pet you today massage. Like, would you like a pet today? Would you like that? Because I can pet you. I need to be almost beaten with a stick. And they always ask you, like, do you like it firm? What's your pressure preference? And I tell them that's what I want. But what I don't mean is in the beginning of the massage for you to put pressure on my rib cage and then crush my ribs. And I guess understand like why they move you around. Like, it kind of like just starts to release the tension a little bit, and you're releasing the air pockets or whatever. Okay, so then I tell him, right? So he took direction pretty well, but like I tell him like, okay, that's a little too hard. So then he's like, okay. So he stops crushing my ribs and then moves down to my legs and then puts way less pressure on my legs. I'm like, no, you can put pressure on my legs. So then, like, by the time we got to that part anyways, it was like almost the end of my massage. And the thing is, I told him to focus on my upper back and my neck. And I swear to you, all he did was like rub lotion in circles on my back. I'm like, how long? And then like all of a sudden, like the time was going by. I'm like, he spent like 20 minutes just doing that. I'm like, he's really not doing anything. And then I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but like where your scapula is, like maybe just above where it like connects to your like shoulder, but it's more closer to your spine rather than like the outside of your shoulder. They always just take that spot and they wiggle it back and forth. And I'm like, congratulations, you found a body part that moves. And they're always like, oh, it's a knot. I'm like, it's not a knot. I'm like, you just found a part of my body that wiggles and moves back and forth. And they'll spend all this time on it, and then it ends up hurting me more, like after. And then all of a sudden I'm like bruised. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I don't know, I'm telling you, I am not that sensitive when it comes to massage. Like light touches, yes. Like you could normally beat me with a bat. I'm like, yeah, go for it. I even had the upgrade where like they use that device that goes like super fast, and it like they do it on your IT bands on your legs. And I was like, yes, this feels so great. She's like, usually people can't handle it. I'm like, see, like I can. It's just certain areas that I'm like, I don't understand. And then they'll even hit like certain trigger pressure points in your neck that will shoot all the way down from your neck, like down your spine, and they'll hold it. And they're like, and I'm like, oh, that hurts, and it's not like the good hurt. Like, the difference between the good hurt and the bad hurt. So I don't know. Sometimes I think like I should go in there and do like a experimental like test run for these facilities that are teaching massage therapy. Cause I'm like, let's talk through this. Like, here, when you do this, this is what I'm feeling, because I don't get it. And even like so they're rubbing your arms, right? Sometimes they will literally just put all of their like body weight. Like they'll put all this pressure on like your forearm, like on the inside, right? And then it cuts off your circulation. And I'm like, the whole point is to circulate. And like they press down on it, and then I can't feel my actual wrists and my hands. I'm like, do you understand that you're cutting off my circulation? Like, I don't know if this happens to other people, but those like specific areas, it does for me anyways. At this point, I feel like my cat gives me a better morning massage, especially on my neck. Like literally, he puts so much pressure on my neck every morning. I'm like, yes, that was better than my massage the other day. I mean, I feel like I could go to the beach and get a better massage by someone putting lotion on my back. I don't know. And so this is not to be mean to massage therapists. I've had some amazing massage therapists. I've just noticed that in these specific areas, it seems to be consistent that they'll do these certain things. Even so, I've had some people rub my shins. I'm like, no, you rub on the sides of the shins, like not the bone. Sometimes I feel like they're working on my bone and on my hips too. On the side of my hip, sometimes I'm like, no, get off the bone. I don't know. So I'm wondering if other people have experienced this, because I have had great massage therapists. I'm not saying that they're not out there, but sometimes I'm like, is this how they're teaching it? I'm like, because it's not right, unless it's just they are amateurs who got jobs. I have no idea. I thought you had to have a license, right? And then that comes the other topic of like, does having a degree actually make you good at your job? And we're always pushing degrees, and now, people are pushing for schooling to be free. And I think it's helpful. But like, I've known plenty of dance instructors, and especially in my field, who have degrees, but it doesn't make them amazing dancers. It's really about the training that you get, not necessarily the degree, in my opinion, and it's about how much do you practice at your craft? Are you constantly learning, or did you just like get the grade and you're like, great, now I do this. I got the degree, I passed the test, and now I don't have to work at it. I feel like in all of our fields, we should be continuously working at whatever our craft is. But I think it's time for me to leave again, not just because I've had a few, bad apples or whatever, but because I can't get an appointment. I'm like, it's like timeshare over here. They're like, sorry, there's no availability. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I paid you for this month. There has to be availability. And then I find myself calling all these different locations and then driving further than I wanted to in my location. So I don't know what the solution is for that. Either bigger facilities and more therapists, or having to say no to walk-ins and really be devoted to your people who are subscribed. I have no idea. But I will say another thing that I wish a lot of these companies did was, when you first sign your contracts and you fill out like that form and it's like, where does it hurt? And you like circle the areas on your body. This is not like a doctor where I've been clinically treated or told that I have an issue. This is massage therapy, meaning it can change from week to week, from month to month. So sometimes, of course, at the beginning of a session, they'll be like, oh, what do you want to work on today? Which is fine. But sometimes they're like, oh, I see your chart. I'm like, that chart is from last year. I'm like, it's not going to always be the same. Plus, you need to make sure you're asking about injuries. Like, for example, I do have an injury to my rib cage. So obviously, putting all your weight on my rib cage and shoving it around isn't going to feel good, So just things like that, I think that therapists need to be more mindful of, and making sure that they're asking the right questions before they just dive in, for sure. Okay, I swear we're going to get to the main topic today, but I also wanted to talk about my other weird ailments. So I have teeth sensitivity. Like, I take really good care of my teeth. Like, I floss and I brush like 2 or 3 times a day. Every time I go to the dentist, they're like, wow, you take such good care of your teeth, like whatever. I have had fillings and cavities, and I'm doing air quotes right now because I don't even know if that was for real, because I had no pain. And then all of a sudden he's like, but you have them. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess we have to get rid of them, right? I'm like, but I have no pain. I don't even understand. And so he did it. And then I had pain. And I was like, did you just like drill my tooth away for no reason? And he's like, I don't understand. And I go, also, you filled it in too much. And now I have like hippopotamus teeth. Like, they're flat. I'm like, I need them to have ridges so I can chew my meat here. Hello. So I don't even know what happened then. I don't know if he made my teeth worse or whatever. But I've switched to Sensodyne, and like ever since then. And I know I've always had sensitive teeth growing up, but like, raise your hand if you have sensitive teeth, because I don't know, like, mine are really sensitive. Like, My husband the other day was like chewing his ice cream. I'm like, wait, are you actually like chewing it on your actual teeth, like the back teeth, like the molars? He's like, yes. And I'm like, and it doesn't bother you? He's like, I even used my front teeth. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, it will literally make my nerve endings freak out. Like it hurts so bad for me. So I have to chew cold things with my tongue, sometimes even hot things. So I have to like press down with my tongue and then swallow it and like try to make sure it doesn't like hit the sides. It's like a pinball machine in there. I'm like, nope, don't hit the sides there. Stay center, don't hit the bumpers at the bowling, alley. I'm just like, oh my gosh. So I'm like constantly like being very aware of that. So anyways, there's another ailment. And then I also have this other issue with carbonation. I don't know if anybody else has this, but for me, carbonated drinks is like pouring acid down my throat. And I must have some sort of terrible acid reflux or something. I don't know. Like I like sauce. I like tomatoes. I only notice it every once in a while. Like when, at night when I'm laying down, I notice it more. I wake up in the morning, like, ooh, my throat kind of burns. I always just attribute that to if I had a glass of wine or if I had salsa the night before or something. But it's also carbonated beverages. Like people who can pick up a can of Coke and chug it. I'm like, how are you physically doing that? So I've never enjoyed carbonated beverages. So I can't do it. I even get sick off champagne, although I think it's just the way they ferment the champagne or sparkling wine or Prosecco. But I get more sick off the bubbles. And then like, I don't even get how you enjoy that anyways, because then it's like you're constantly burping and that's uncomfortable and my stomach's all swollen. I'm like, I don't know how anybody enjoys that. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what I have some sort of sensitivity I feel that I have not been diagnosed with. I'm like, why am I so sensitive everywhere? Like, I have no idea. Who knows? So, speaking of beverages, let's get to the main topic, which today we're talking about coffee. Who doesn't love a cup of joe? Yes, a delicious cup of coffee. I've been very good about my coffee intake, especially because I know that coffee has been said to affect pregnancy. And of course, these are studies that have been done, but mostly not proved. A lot of these they start theoretically, and then they do a lot of studies, but it's hard for them to like say anything indefinitely. So it's more of a suggestion for all of this that I am about to discuss. With coffee, I usually just do 1 cup a day. In very eager circumstances, if I'm on a long drive or I'm up really late at night because of work, then I will have another cup of coffee. Or if I need to stay up at night, I will have another cup of coffee. But I do feel it makes my head lift off my body and sometimes makes me feel nauseous and dizzy because it's just too much. My body can't handle it. So I always say, listen to your body. And of course, this whole episode is going to be geared towards saying in moderation. I had some really good coffee and I was doing my subscribe and save and I was like, should I buy organic? What's the difference? And then I just started researching it and I was like, I should probably know. So the organic coffees are definitely the way to go. Is Starbucks organic? No, they are not. They're probably the more, commercialized cup of coffee, and they do use, beans that are not necessarily approved and are probably coated in pesticides. So I did want to, research into more of that. And then also when I found out that Seattle's best coffee is made from the same producers as Starbucks, it hurt my heart because I really like Seattle's best. But the main rule of thumb looking into this was noticing that companies like Maxwell House and Folgers, they don't really have as many regulations. And in fact, most of the products that are on the shelf are companies that use pesticides on their beans. So these crops are steeped in synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides. And if you work on the farm, you are highly exposed to these chemicals, which are way worse when inhaled or in contact with the skin. And your cocktail of the day is the Paloma. This drink has been making a comeback lately, especially for the summer, and the original word translates to the dove. So this might bring you some peace this summer. This drink is going to be 2 ounces of fresh grapefruit juice, or you could even do sparkling grapefruit soda, 2 ounces of tequila, a ½ ounce of fresh lime juice, teaspoon of sugar, and 2 ounces of club soda. Coat the rim with kosher salt or sugar. Now, all countries have different regulations, and the U.S. does a pretty good job at regulating the pesticides. But these pesticides also contribute to the dying bee colonies, which doesn't surprise me that humans who are trying to, make a buck and to, give things back to our human culture, to our humankind, that we would somehow be affecting the insects and the animals in our world. Of course, we'd be doing that because that's what humans do. We, find an answer and a solution, and then years later, we find out what the effects of it are, which are always way worse. And as shown, coffee is the second most commonly traded commodity in the world after petroleum. So the issue right now is the U.S. government doesn't have it's called a MRL, well, MRLs, maximum residue limit for pesticides used on coffee beans. So this leaves you open to a huge range of unknown pesticide residue levels that are just going to sit or lurk on the surface of your coffee. Now, the good thing is not to be scared by that, but they say that about 85% of the toxins are burned off during the roasting process. And then continually, your body will naturally remove some of the toxins as you drink it. So our bodies are pretty amazing in that aspect. So here's the thing that I discovered, and I don't get it. I tried to find even more information on it, so if you know, let me know. So caffeine is contained in more than 60 plants. So it's extremely useful as a pesticide or an insecticide. So they say that caffeine is toxic for several insects and animals, especially herbivores. So when it's under attack by unwanted invertebrates, the coffee plant increases the dose of caffeine that it produces to kill the intruder. So why are we spraying them so heavily? Don't they already do the job of deterring these creatures? So then why are we spraying them so heavily? That's the part I don't get. And they're like, yeah, people are actually considering putting caffeine in their sprays to protect their plants. And I'm starting to wonder if that's why they say that coffee grounds are good to put around your plants. I just thought it would just wake them up, but maybe it also does that. The caffeine kind of wakes up the plant and helps it grow. I don't know, but maybe it's also a natural insecticide, and that's why they say to do it. So then why are we spraying them? Why? I don't understand why we're doubling down then. So that was the only thing I couldn't find when researching, but I just found that interesting. Okay, also, I had to read this so many times because I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. But okay, you know how when you fill up a water balloon, it's bigger, right? Typically, a sponge is bigger when there's water in it, right? Am I losing my mind? Okay, well, I read more than one article to prove it, but it turns out that as the beans roast, they lose water, right? And then they also puff up slightly. And the only thing I can think of is honey smacks, the rice, but that's usually because I don't know that, because with regular rice, it, gets puffier because there's water in it. Well, this does the opposite. And so the longer the roast time, the more pronounced those effects are. Now, a dark roast bean will weigh less and then be slightly larger than a light roast bean. So when the ground beans are measured by volume, the light roast particles will be denser and they will weigh more and they will contain more caffeine than a darker grind. So that produces a more caffeinated brew. So these are all things producers have to consider, right? I mean, talk about weight loss. These little beans are under a lot of pressure. But the only way to ensure that you're getting the same amount of caffeine with different roasts is to weigh the coffee. That's the only way that you're going to know. So if you measure by volume, you'll end up with more caffeine, with a light roast than with a dark roast. Another thing that they also do, and it is true, light roasts are more acidic. But most people are always like, oh, well, the darker the coffee, the higher caffeine. And that's not actually true. They have different jargon when they're cooking, but a light roast will last until a single crack is heard, right? So that's why they call it the first crack. And then they'll know to take it out of the cooking process. And then as the beans roast darker, both the caffeine content and the flavors, they start, roasting out. So a lot of the lighter roasts actually have kind of like a floral content to them because they're still, closer to what the original plant was. And the darker roasts are actually less acidic and have the least caffeine. So they get, most of their smoky flavor, the darker roasts, from the oil that actually surfaces on the bean. And then the light and medium roasts have little to no oil at all. So, but yeah, it's just so strange to me. Like, so the bean roasts, as they cook more, they get thicker. I still don't get that, but they call that the second crack. And then after that second crack, you can, overcook it, and then it'll end up tasting like charcoal. So they do have like these little beans, they get lots of attention to make sure that they are roasting. I'm sure that they've wasted batches by overcooking them before. Okay. Then I wanted to talk about tea and decaf coffee and just a little bit more about that. Now, tea contains more caffeine than coffee by dry weight, but less weight is used in general to brew a cup of tea. So both the type of tea and the infusing time can affect the amount of caffeine that you are intaking. And so the caffeine content of a cup of tea is usually less than 60 milligrams, but a strong cup of tea may contain more caffeine than a weak cup of regular coffee. So it just depends on how you're brewing it. But also, you've probably seen it on the bags at like Starbucks, and like rarely, but Robusta coffee has nearly twice the amount of caffeine compared to Arabica beans. And Arabica is like the one that everybody drinks. So like if you see a Robusta, that's the one that's like, "Oh, wow, they have Robusta today." Like you don't see that around as often. Then we've got our decaf. Now, decaf, the caffeine actually prevents, just in general, so caffeine prevents the growth of molds, which produce something called mycotoxins. So with decaf, because it's so low in caffeine, it lacks the same protective mechanisms. So when you remove the caffeine, your beans are kind of defenseless. So decaf coffee is actually higher in both aflatoxin and ochratoxins, which once again sounds bad, and your body does process things, most of it out, but that's just one of the facts. And decaf also contains more fat. Yikes. Now, I'm sure it's less fattening than a bowl of ice cream, but still something to consider. And those toxins can happen because of molding. And a lot of these distributors are great distributors, and they make sure that their warehouses are temperature controlled to help the quality of the coffee from producing those mycotoxins and things like that, which can be harmful to consumer health. So it's something to keep in mind. But like I said, I always feel like, why do we as Americans have to constantly like double check, our packages and all of these things? Like we're always hoping, because like I'll sign a petition, like I'm always, but like why do I have to sign a petition? How come our, FDA and our country is not already putting restrictions and illegalizing processes like this so that we don't have to do that extra legwork? It is a little frustrating in that sense. I've also heard some moms say, first of all, it's a drug, right? And some people claim certain things, and you're like, oh, that's kind of anecdotal. And most things are anecdotal. There's very few studies. They're like, without a shadow of a doubt, this is definitely true, the more that you read into them. But some people say it helps ADHD because, they say caffeine helps you focus and like wake up and everything. So, but that's temporary. So while it might be true in that moment, it's temporary. And I would be more concerned about the future side effects, because if your kid does get addicted to it, or they have too much, it can cause anxiety and headaches and withdrawal. And, your kid's brain is still developing. So I personally think that, kids should stay away from drinking coffee. And I think there's a reason why, they gear it towards adults. Another thing too, I think it was around 2004, but more than 5 to 6 cups of coffee could literally disqualify you from the Olympics. So it's considered an enhancement drug, right? So performance enhancement. I think they brought it back, and they still check levels and things like that. But they were like, yep, this is too much caffeine, and you could be faster and stronger and more focused than your other, opponent. So here's another thing I want to talk about. So caffeine is absorbed from your stomach. So I want to talk more about like the chemical process of this. So it reaches its highest levels in your bloodstream within an hour or two. So that morning cup of coffee, which will kick in and last around 12 hours for the day, is sufficient. It should do the trick. So to me, this is why it's the healthiest option. So caffeine blocks a receptor called the adenosine receptor, and it causes an increased release of dopamine, noradrenaline, and glutamate. So the adenosine chemical is what they call the sleepy chemical, and it prevents dopamine from absorbing into our system, making it hang around longer, making us want more coffee. But you can reverse the effects of it if you stay awake, because what you're actually doing is blocking the adenosine, the sleepy chemical, and not allowing your body to rest like it needs to and then reboot for the next day. So, it sounds like, oh, I just want to do that all the time. Give me some more dopamine. And that's why people can get addicted to it. That's why it's considered a drug, because you're constantly wanting that high. And like I said, for me, if I have too much coffee, my head starts floating and I can actually get really nauseous from it. But like other drugs, like drinking alcohol, I always found this interesting. When you have a hangover, you drink coffee, it helps to relax your brain. So our brains shrink from dehydration when we drink too much alcohol until we wake up and we rehydrate our brains in the morning. So during a headache, your blood vessels will swell up and they tighten, or they go through other changes, causing the increase in blood flow around your brain. So the increase in blood flow pressure surrounding the nerves sends that pain message, and it's like, oh, I have a headache. So the caffeine narrows the blood vessels to restrict the blood flow, and then that alleviates the pain. Also, there was a study that showed that after doing, an aggressive workout for your day, athletes who ingested caffeine with a carbohydrate had 66% more glycogen in their muscles 4 hours after finishing an intense workout. Which I find interesting. So basically, when you're working out, you are depleting your body of that glycogen, and that's why you get really tired, right? So you need another way to restore that. And so then people, will turn to different things. And that's why they say that, right after that you should eat probably your worst foods like right after a workout, because you're going to burn them off, quote unquote, and it's going to give you that energy. But I guess the combination of carbohydrates and caffeine is good for you, which would make sense for all of those people that are super fit who wake up at 4 a.m. and they go to the YMCA or whatever. And then after their workout, they're like, I'm going to have a cup of coffee and maybe a donut for breakfast, or no, don't have donuts. But some sort of, healthy carb. And it's okay if they do that. And then it's restoring their energy for the day to keep going and to keep doing, minimal exercise, like getting their steps in and things like that. So I guess that's an interesting fact. But yeah, the glycogen is the muscle's primary fuel source during exercise. So it's just replenished more rapidly when, you put both of those things together. And I just thought that was a fun fact. All right, guys, here's your real estate tip of the day. Moving can be very stressful, so make sure that you are prepared before moving into your new home. When you are getting ready to move, it is time to have a garage sale or get rid of some stuff. So get the things that you do not need anymore. Try to make a little extra buck, and that money can go towards expenses, especially if you are hiring movers. Now, we want to make sure before we move into that house that we clean our new space. Make sure you give yourself ample time. Take the day off of work or hire a cleaning service to clean the floors. Also, make sure you are knowing and marking where all of your electrical outlets are so you know where to place things. It is very helpful to label your boxes and to make sure you are labeling the rooms for yourself and for your movers so that when you bring those boxes in, you know exactly where to put them before they pile up and you can't get through them. Disassemble your furniture before you move to help the travel process, and maybe make minor home repairs before you move in. Also, measure out your furniture and the space that it's going in before you build into that space. Happy moving! So that's one good thing. There's other, things that they've, done some research on too. Consumption can decrease the risk of heart disease, stroke, cancer. Studies have shown that coffee may have protection against Parkinson's disease or type 2 diabetes and liver disease and liver cancer. And of course, we know cognitive function, and that can decrease the risk of depression. It's also a natural antioxidant. And Americans get more antioxidants from coffee than most fruits and vegetables, which is crazy to me. I'm like, what? Because I guess it is a plant, so I don't know. And while it's good that coffee is an antioxidant, it's not to replace antioxidant-rich foods from natural resources as well. But I just thought, those are positive things. On the flip side, 4 to 7 cups a day, which who's doing that? Some of these studies are like we did a test on people who have 10 cups a day. How are you having 10 cups a day? I mean, whew, that is rough. I actually worked with a guy, and I remember he had the craziest jitters I had ever seen of a person. I worked with him every day for years, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I would get concerned that he was going to pass out or have a seizure or something. But it does, if you have too much, like anything, everything in moderation, right? It can cause anxiety, tremors, tachycardia, arrhythmias. Some report mood disorders, obviously, and even body dysmorphia. So it can also prevent calcium absorption. So that can cause osteoporosis. So if you are a person who's already been diagnosed with osteoporosis, don't overdo the coffee, I would say. And of course, they advise pregnant women or women trying to conceive to stay at just a cup a day if you do, because it can be a contributor to infertility. Like I said, can't handle more than 1 cup anyway, so 1 cup in the morning is usually good for me and helps me poo. That's what I use it for. I would say, in conclusion, Starbucks is way too expensive. Save your money, do your math. It's way cheaper just to buy a pack of coffee and brew it at home. Buy organic. I would say to consider plasticless coffee pods so that you aren't risking BPA seeping into your coffee. And even with the regular brewed, coffees, the container itself is plastic with hot coffee, brewing into it. So something else to consider, or unbleached paper filters. But the best form is really to use a French press. And I have all 3. So not only do I have an espresso, I have a Keurig, I do not have the coffee pot anymore, but I do have a French press that I use quite often. But that is the best way to go. And then to stay away from blends. So blends of coffee are bad news because they mix cheap beans from multiple areas, almost guaranteeing that you'll get some moldy ones. So they say to stay away from the word blend. I know the word blend sounds lovely, doesn't it? But I guess not so much. And then this is why they say it's important to buy your coffee from a single estate instead of mass market coffee like Folgers or Maxwell. So yeah, that's just few fun facts of coffee for today. I love coffee. I think it's delicious. I think it's a great alternative for social time if you're not a drinker. But there are lots of things to consider, and I wish we didn't have to consider those things so often, but we do. Oh my goodness. Also, it was Robin Williams. I always think about him because my brain is always going a mile a minute like him. And I told my friend the other day, I was like, I have the worst handwriting because my brain is always going so quickly. And when I learned how to type, I was like so excited that I could start typing because I could finally, type at the speed that my brain was working. But that's why I have terrible handwriting. If I take time, it can look decent, but I don't have any patience. So, but it was his birthday last week and then the anniversary of his death. And, just love the funny man and, wish you were here to make us laugh. Wish you were here to make us laugh. He was definitely, of all of the celebrities in the world. And I feel like most people feel this way. Isn't it incredible when somebody can affect you and touch you so much emotionally and you've never even met them? Not only does he look like my father too, which is also just ugh. So that's just a thing for me. He looks like my dad. But he's just such a talented actor, and he was so real, and you could see his emotions. Every emotion, he expressed, you could see it, you could feel it, you understood that where he was coming from was genuine and lighthearted, and it's so sad that he just was gone too soon, and that his brain wasn't functioning the way that he remembered it to. Anyway, so much love to Robin Williams. So don't forget, while you're purchasing your coffees, try to choose organic, and that a dark roast typically has less acidity than a light roast. And even though a light and a dark roast are virtually the same amount of caffeine, a dark roast may have just a little bit less caffeine than a lighter roast. And a coffee bean isn't a bean at all. Despite their name, they're actually seeds. They grow on shrubs and bushes, and they produce small little red fruits called coffee cherries. This has been Katie Rose, served straight up with a twist. Catch my follow-up Fridays on YouTube, where I respond to your YouTube comments on any thoughts or questions relating to each week's episode. It gives you a chance to have a more intimate conversation with me and opens up the door to new topics. Find me at my YouTube channel, Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. And remember, if you're thinking it, I'm probably talking about it.